We're so excited to share Giselle's interview. She's a delight and she'll be there for Q&A afterwards. Here we go.
Hey, so I am Giselle Clarkson and I am an illustrator and comic artist, and I live in Wairarapa, so Wellington adjacent. I've been working sort of primarily as an illustrator for the last, might be sort of 5 years or so now professionally. I do it full time. I sometimes don't know, like, am I an illustrator? Am I a comic artist? Sometimes I feel like more one than the other, but for me, there's a lot of crossover. I suppose, I mean, making comics and the drawing there's definitely a form of illustration to me. And then I bring a lot of like the narrative stuff and the humor into my illustration. So I do like picture books. I have some published with like Gecko Press, The Tiny Woman's Coat and The Gobbledygook Book, which is a Joy Cowley anthology. I've also done a cookbook, this one here, called Egg and Spoon. It's by Alexandra Tiley with illustrations by me. And then the other stuff I do is commercial work, and I do some comics work as well. The Sapling is a really fantastic website about New Zealand children's books, which is on hiatus at the moment, but the entire website is still online, and I did a two-monthly comic for them about children's books and stuff. And something I just started doing recently is sort of comic illustrations for New Zealand Geographic. So that's kind of my sort of this sort of thing. So that's like my latest, like the comics side of me. Yeah, but it's a very blurry line to me. So yeah, that's me.
We put this session together with the idea that we would talk through a commission. One of the things that we did was commission you to do our poster for ComicFest in 2021. Neil and I turned up in your email box and said, hello, we would like to commission you to do a poster. Is that something that happens to you quite frequently?
Yeah, I mean, that's really how I get all my work. And it means there's always equal amounts of like excitement and anxiety about what might turn up or not turn up in your inbox from one week to the next. And so often it is just like all or nothing. You could get like 4 amazing opportunities that turn up in a week, and then it's just like silence. And you do that thing where you go into your Gmail like settings and you're like, has it checked my email today? And then it's like, last checked 1 minute ago, no new mail. But that's how I get most of my work, because now that I've been, my name's been out there for a while now, and basically most of my jobs come by sort of word of mouth, or people have seen my work somewhere else and got in touch with me that way. So
how did you get your stuff out there in the first place?
It was Twitter. And it was sort of like the good old days of Twitter. Like, it seems weird because it's not even like it was that long ago, but the world changes fast. And I'm almost a bit scared of Twitter now. Like, it's a big, dark, scary place where it's like a room full of too many people now. And I still feel like I'm in the corner like, hi, hello. I had no followers, or I didn't really know nobody I knew. I had no mutual friends on Twitter or anything. But I just started putting my work out there. I followed a bunch of people. They followed me back. Like, the creative community in New Zealand, and particularly comics, is just been welcoming and supportive and incredible. So it was kind of through just putting little sort of sketches and funny little doodles on Twitter that I then started to get to know online the Wellington comics community, like, and in other places in New Zealand as well. But like, just about everybody who was like on the ComicFest list for last year are people that I met through Twitter, and then that developed into like meeting up for coffee or like seeing each other at comics events and stuff. And those people were amazing for sharing my work, telling other people like, oh, have you seen Giselle stuff? She's like started doing these things or whatever. Yeah, otherwise there's kind of like there's a more like professional route, but it still kind of links back to Twitter. Like I started doing a lot of bird illustrations on my Twitter, and that got me my first job with the Forest and Bird Children's magazine, because the editor, she saw my work on Twitter and said, oh, here's somebody who draws birds. That was my very first commercial job, professional job. And then that through, you know, the editor of that magazine, talking to a friend of hers who worked at the school journal, saying, oh, here's somebody who meets a deadline. You might want to work with her. And then just sort of got passed on from there. So I don't think that any work necessarily comes through people being like, going into Google and being like, New Zealand illustrator. Like, I just don't think that's happening. Like, of course you have to have your online portfolio and a presence and stuff so people can see your work, but like, I don't think, yeah, it's so much more likely that somebody sees you in a book, a magazine, a poster, and yeah, comes to you that way.
How do you choose what to say yes to and what to say, oh no, this is not for me?
I'm quite lucky in that there's already like a bit of a filter, because people don't generally come to me if they want, I don't know, a drawing of people working out in a gym next to some trucks in a race car. I don't like, I mean, I'm just terrible, like any kind of sort of machinery or vehicles or something. Like it comes up from time to time in my work, but I find that just a nightmare. I would rather draw 10,000 horse legs. And I can't draw people with like muscles or anything. Not without a lot of stress and strife and just like at my desk. So people come to me for what I like to draw anyway, basically, which centers itself around nice, friendly looking people with wobbly arms, animals, New Zealand conservation type stuff, food. There's definitely like, yeah, there's a range of things that I draw and people come to me for that. So it more just ends up being like, do I have the time to take on something, or do I really feel like I'm the right person for it, or do I actually think somebody else could do it better? It's just such a juggle constantly. And because you always have that thing where like you might be working on a project that actually kind of goes on over the course of like 2 months, say, but you're not working for all of that because there's going to be a period in the middle where you've sent off your drafts and the editor or the art director or the designer or whoever is like looking over them and getting feedback or whatever, and they'll get back to you. So you have to figure out like, what can I slot in that 2 weeks? And are these projects going to run on time? Because as soon as one person goes over on their bit for whatever reason, and it's often like very legit, but it just means that, you know, you get this crunch. But yeah, I mean, certainly like in the first few years of my career, I was just working every single weekend. Weekends had no meaning. And it was, yeah, probably not that healthy, but a couple of years ago, I was like, no, I'm gonna keep office hours from now on.
Nice. We sent you a little brief of what we wanted, and I imagine that briefs come to you in all shapes and sizes.
I get the full spectrum of brief types, like with like school journal and educational work, for example. It's like very, very prescribed because the illustrations have to perform like a very particular job alongside the text, you know, for kids decoding the stories and that sort of thing. So that's like very it's creative in a different way because you have to figure out how to show something very specific in a very specific sized space. So I actually really enjoy that challenge. And then there is the other side, which is make it look cool. here's an A3 piece of paper, just make it look cool, which is kind of what yours was.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. What happens then? Do you have a little freak out and then say, okay?
Yeah, I mean, freak out for 3 or 4 days, just sort of like make the Photoshop file to feel like I've done something, make the little folder on my desktop and like put the file in there, and then sort of open it up now and then, and do a scribble, and then get angry and close it again. And hopefully have something else to work on in the meantime. It took me a while to come up with a cool idea, I guess. I tried a lot of different things because I was thinking like, what do I like to draw? What just looks cool? And I think like forests look cool. so like an early idea was to have like all these sort of comic characters and like cartoons of the comic artists themselves kind of peeking out from behind trees and kind of a big forest or something. But it didn't feel like it was working. There was a couple of other ideas. I'll go into my layers. After I finish a drawing, there's always the like layer 1, 2, 3, and 4 or whatever that are just so completely different to what it ends up being in the end. But I've turned the layers off, so the history of a piece is in there somewhere.
So you do all your ideation sketches in the same file?
Yeah, I do, because I am not good at draft work. I don't keep a sketchbook. It's like a terrible sin. And I'm a real like one and done type person. Like kind of happens with like any sort of craft or any hobby that I take up. I'm like, I'm going to do this once, I'm going to do it well, and then I'm never going to do it again. And so it's a bit like that with my illustrations, like and comics. Like I don't get sick of the drawing in general, but I'm just like, I'm going to do once. And if I build up an idea from scratch, I often find that it can end up looking overworked to me quite quickly. So, I mean, I do have to use roughs a lot in my work because clients need to know where you're going. So I've trained myself to do that, but it means that, in the final file will be all the starting doodles, and then I kind of end up developing it as I go. And often I haven't come up with the final composition until I'm at the end, because I like to drag elements around on the page and that sort of thing right up until the end. But it was actually the thing that really got me to come up with an idea in the end was I was thinking about Toby Morris's really cool band posters that he does, actually. And they're often so random, or like his posters for the Beths. Like you just have, I don't know, like a pukeko and like just really cool sort of monsters just sitting around or whatever, or somebody with like 10 eyes. And they look so cool and I love them. And I'm always just in awe of like, how did you think of that? It's not like there's no obvious connection to anything, but it looks rad. So that was what I thought. I'm like, okay, think like Toby for a minute here. And that's when I was like, you know what? I like drawing birds. I'm just going to draw a bunch of birds and I'm going to have people riding those birds. And so then it came from there. I was like, okay, well, they're coming into Wellington, and why don't I make the birds or whatever they're flying on, like in some way relevant to the comic artist that is riding them. So yeah, thanks, Toby.
So you sent us that idea of the birds and sent us a sketch of that.
Yeah, and I think it was pretty loose at that stage, but that is what is nice about when the people I'm working for, when they are like illustrators or artists or whatever themselves, or even if they're sort of designers or people who have done a lot of drawing and worked with a lot of artists themselves, it's always good because you can send them this thing that is just an absolute shambles and know that like they can decipher it and they will trust you to take it through to the standard they expect, because it's when you're working with people that haven't worked with a lot of artists or aren't artists themselves that you send them a sketch and they're like, is it going to have color in the end? Or something like that. You're like, yes, I promise it will. Like, I'm better at drawing than this, I promise. So I mean, that was nice. Like, I knew that you weren't going to be like but it is still like, I think about this all the time. I'm like, will there be a point when I won't be terrified sending off my work to a client? Like, it's still every single time before I send off drafts or final art or anything, I'm just like, it's terrifying. Pressing that send button, it never gets any easier because, of course, in my head, I'm like, they're going to hate it. This is the worst. I can't draw. So, like, in case anybody who's like new to it all is watching this, like, it doesn't get better.
How do you manage that anxiety?
How do I manage it? Stronger deodorant. No, I guess it's really scary, but I suppose it creates an equal sense of like ecstasy and relief when you get the email back from the editor or whoever who is like, I love it, you know, and that's when you're like, you want to run down the street screaming with joy. So you get the highs and the lows, but yeah.
And I think that was our feedback, basically, was like, yay.
Yeah, so it's just like the most massive relief, because that is by far the hardest part, is the ideas. Ideas are hard. Drawing is easy compared to ideas. So yeah, and I always feel better once I've got to that stage, because once I know what I'm drawing, I don't have to like think so much anymore. I can go into a sort of autopilot mode and just put on music or the radio or something and zone out, and it's a lot more I guess just then, like, I can trust my I don't trust my hand to just do what it's supposed to do, instead of like really engaged thinking, which is quite exhausting when you're trying to come up with ideas or a composition. It's always easier after that, because it's just a matter of like perhaps finding some reference images and just making it look cool. You know what you're doing, so you just go for it. Yeah,
and I think that we sent you the full list of participants at that time.
Yeah, it was really it's scary drawing other people, and probably even a bit scarier drawing other people's characters, because especially when it's people whose work I admire so much and who've been doing this for longer than me. And so before I was even drawing, I was looking at their stuff being like, this is incredible. And there I am sort of doing an imitation of their characters. And it was really daunting. It was quite scary, but nobody seemed to get mad. So that's good. I did worry, like, if it was going to be a bit too happy. I thought like, because I wanted to represent like the full spectrum of comics, because that's what was there, you know, and like my style is only one small part of that. And so I thought, like, how badass can I make Mikkel look as he's coming in as the Liger? So like I did my very best to like put a, you know, a nod to like wrestling and superheroes and stuff, which is a huge part of the comics world. But yeah, I suppose I let colors do a lot of the work for me in terms of conveying a mood and everything. And luckily Wellington has a very very distinct sort of landscape, like it's quite easy to simplify Wellington Harbour into a way that is recognizable. But that's the sort of thing I agonize over, because I get really particular about whether or not something's realistic or not. And I'm never this way when I look at other people's work, though. So I look at somebody else who's like simplified a place and kind of got all the landmarks of a city together, you sort of overlaid or something in an image. And I never think that looks silly. I'm like, yeah, cool. That's like a representation of Wellington or whatever. But as soon as I have to draw it, and I'm like, no. But the beehive is a long, long way from the bucket fountain or whatever. Like I can't draw them next to each other. And it's something about myself where I'm like, I'm not good at the sort of the abstract, I'm not quite sure what it is, but like even when I'm drawing, people riding giant birds or whatever, I have to, I have like my threshold for like the realistic or not.
That's why your birds are so well done, is that you do have that attention to detail.
It's because I just always think there's going to be one person out there who's like, kind of goose has 2 stripes on its neck, not one. This is the sort of thing I lose sleep over. So it's sort of like always doing my best to satisfy my need for things to be just accurate enough. But like I agonized over the size of the birds in relation to the other birds and stuff. And there was this discussion we had on Twitter, like when the poster first came out, where we were like, there's Dylan riding a sparrow. Is it a really large sparrow or a really tiny Dylan? I don't know. It's going to sound silly, but I feel like I don't have much imagination compared to other people. Like coming up with if somebody said like come up with a completely invented monster or a completely invented creature or something, I'm like, that's really hard for me.
But I imagine that the monster that you would come up with would have elements of real life New Zealand birds, probably. Yeah.
Well, that's what I end up doing with stuff when I absolutely have to. Like when I illustrated the Gobbledygook book with Gecko Press, there was a story in there that was about the jumbaroo, which is just this animal that has nowhere in the poem does it describe what the jumbaroo looks like in any way, except that it's got like a woggly and it never says what a woggly is. You don't know what part of it. What's a woggly? It's just got a sore woggly. So what I ended up drawing was I basically just borrowed body parts from as many different creatures as I could think of. No. It was weird though, because I made the woggly the nose, and like when the story was first illustrated like decades ago by another illustrator, they made the woggly the tummy. Yeah.
I immediately went to leg or tail.
So it's like quite a good experiment.
Yeah. What is a woggly? Yeah. One of the things that was really helpful is that you sent us the Photoshop file with all of the layers. You had all the characters on different layers, so if things needed to be nudged in different ways, they could be. Which is that a trick that you've learned along the way, or?
Yeah, like I often end up doing that because in lots of cases a designer will need to move elements or like use it for different formats. So for this you needed it to be able to use for like sort of long narrow headers for Facebook events or whatever, and so that way it could be totally adjustable. It's always a little bit scary, sending your work over to somebody and then trusting them to rearrange it. Because, ultimately, like it's still more associated with you, so you're like, don't make it look bad. But I had no cause for worry in the case of ComicFest because actually it ended up looking great. And I have learned my lesson because there was like a job in the past. It was that same thing where elements had to be shifted, and I hadn't, because there were things that were hidden behind something else, I hadn't completed the picture that was behind. So like because it's not something you have to think about when you're drawing on paper. Like if you can't see something, you can't see something. It's just not there. But if the elements need to move, they all have to be like entire in their own right, if you get what I mean. Because yeah, so I had to be real thorough. Like even stuff that was going off the edge of the page actually had to have like a lot more body, whether or not it was going to be used or not, just so that that flexibility was there. Yeah.
One of the faux pas that we did was in the brief, we gave you a really small poster size.
I just think it's so generous of you to suggest that this was your faux pas, not mine.
It was definitely in the brief. Our instructions to you were bad.
Yeah, but I really should have known better. Like, I'm not new to this. Like, every time I go to start my final art, like one of the first things I do before I draw a single thing is I go and I check the document settings to make sure that the page is actually the right size, because you just can't tell when it's on the screen.
For people listening in, the brief said that our poster would be as big as A3, which is a kind of 2 normal sheets of paper. And later on, we were like, oh, actually, this looks amazing. We want to blow this up quite big. And once you create a file that's small, it looks blurry if you try and stretch it out.
So like I sent the poster off just like totally finished and everything, and Sam was like, awesome, like go ahead, like send us your invoice, you're all done. And then I don't know, it was like a day or two later or something where I get this other email that's like, oh, have you got the high res file? And I'm just like and just like all the blood just drains from your head. You just go cold. You get heart palpitations, and you're just like, no. Because basically what that would mean, like if I had sent them a file to small with a low resolution, would mean that it couldn't be blown up large, and I would have to basically draw the entire thing again. So this is what I was freaking out about, just so that we're clear. So I went into what I believed was the super large high res final version of the poster, and I think maybe I'd done it high enough resolution, which you don't want it below 400 really for print. That's 400 DPI. But I think maybe I just made the paper size too small, or it was the other way around. Maybe the paper was big, but the resolution was small. I'm not sure, or maybe it was both. But anyway, I'd drawn the entire thing just too small. So I was extremely fortunate in that it was sort of just, part of it is because my style is a little bit rough around the edges. It meant that I could actually enlarge it sufficiently just based on what I had drawn, which was, that hardly ever works. Like usually if you try and blow up something that's too small, it's just going to look terrible. It's going to start looking pixelated and blurry and stuff. But I got away with it this time, but that was very marginal. And it's just because my drawing style is, for this poster, it was fairly crisp in places, but on the whole, not like, doesn't rely on like the cleanest, smoothest lines. So like it's a bit more forgiving. I mean, it was just such a rookie error. So once again, it doesn't get better.
In other commissions, have you had those moments of like rookie errors that you can tell maybe other rookies who are starting out?
Don't merge your layers unless you're absolutely sure that you don't need them anymore, or like I'm so cautious about that. So I guess as just like a very basic explanation, like if you're working in Photoshop and you're drawing, your line art on a different layer to your coloring in, and then, you know, you might have like some other sort of sketchy details and stuff over the top. And like often my drawings, like the ComicFest poster would have been getting into like, by the time I was done, I was probably up to like 300 layers or something. It doesn't mean I use them all, but they just kind of like build up. And that means that, yeah, you can always just, you can erase something without disturbing the layers underneath it and all that sort of thing. But if you merge them together, you can't unmerge them. And so if you do it too soon, you'll find that you want to just adjust the color of something, but you can't because it's tied to every other element in the picture or whatever. And it's not something I've done for a while because I take extra precautions now. I make duplicates of all my files like before I even think about merging my layers, because like you have to do it at the end. You can't send your work off to a designer or whatever with 250 layers, because they don't want that. They don't care if they can separate the beak from the eyeball or whatever. So you have to merge them at some point, but do it in a different document. Like duplicate it. Don't do it in your working file, if that makes sense. Yeah. I have rough, and then I have working final, and then I have final.
Oh, no. There's a lot of trust in trusting your precious artwork to someone else who will use it in maybe a way that you weren't expecting to.
Yeah, because that's why you got to look out for yourself as much as possible, because it's you who's being represented as the thing. Like it might be somebody else that kind of screwed up, but like it's not their drawing, like their name isn't anywhere on it. Like somebody can take your work and like make it look terrible, and then it will be like by Giselle Clarkson. And you just have to pretend it never happened. I guess it's a thing about picking who you work with too, because you do know that like if you're working with people who have or organizations who have like a good reputation for producing good imagery and stuff, that they're probably, you can entrust them with your work. They're probably not going to accidentally stretch it out so it looks really really bad and whack a big logo in a terrible place. So like with this job, I wasn't worried about that. And I think in general, people I choose to work with, it's because I know that it's going to be a good collaboration. And I'm not going to get a horrible fright. And often that stuff comes up in a contract anyway. It's like, we can or we can't take elements out of this illustration and use it, or we can or we can't change the color of it and paste it on the side of a bus if we want to, or yeah.
Do you have a standard contract that you send out?
I absolutely hate that stuff. I love it in that it protects me generally, but in terms of no, that's like the worst part of the job. So I actually really love it when the client sends me a contract and I always make a point of reading them fully. Like I feel like that's the bare minimum I can do, is actually like fully understand it. And I think that's really, really important. And make sure that I'm not going to get screwed over is the main thing. And have a dialogue with the people. If I'm like, oh, actually, like, what does this mean? Or like, can we take that bit out or put this bit in or whatever? And I'm lucky I haven't had any problems with that. Yeah, so I like it when people send me one, because I have used my own contract sometimes, but it's very, very basic, and it's sort of just because often like you get a written agreement in emails, and for a lot of jobs that's actually enough.
What other tips do you have for people?
My number one tip for people is, if you want to get recommended, is meet deadlines. Like I reckon, because I say this all the time, that you could be like the best at art in the world. You could just be so good at drawing. But if you can't do that drawing on time, it doesn't even matter. Nobody will want to work with you. So yeah. Read your briefs really carefully, like right down to the to the size that it needs to be. But I mean, I often end up reading briefs many times. Like I'll sort of read it when I first get it, and then I'll kind of come up with my sketches and stuff and a few ideas. And then I go back to the brief. And often at that stage, even that early on, I'm like, oh, I've kind of like meandered away. I need to come back to, to focus on what is needed or whatever. And then I'll read it again before I finally send it off, just to make sure. And even at that stage, sometimes I'll catch things myself where I'm like, oh, I don't know if I've quite met that. I need to put in this extra element or whatever. So read really, really carefully.
In our brief for you, we asked you to do lots of different things that represented all the graphic community in New Zealand. So you did a lot of fabulous different styles, but they were also yours. And I was wondering how you went about preparing yourself mentally to draw in different styles.
I think the main thing was actually just making sure I stayed in my style. Because it would have been quite easy for me actually to like slip into other people's style when I'm drawing their characters. Because like I haven't really done a lot of that, because I know people who do like amazing fan art and things where they're drawing other characters, from, that are already, animated or illustrated, and they're drawing them in their own style. And I've never really done any of that. So like I find it quite hard to make sure that I'm not, because I wanted to honor and pay homage to these characters that other people had come up with, but I didn't want to copy them, because I thought that would just be, then they might as well have done the poster themselves, like. So I actually found it hardest with the people whose style I'm most similar to, because I was like, oh no, are people just going to think that I've like traced their character? Yeah, it was just making sure that I didn't, just slip into their style. And a lot of it just, they're such distinct characters that, there's so many clues as to who they are. And I was sort of trying to match the colors that the artists had used and stuff like that. And then, I suppose probably scarier is where I was drawing actual people. Like,
we're talking about getting that exposure and getting your name out there. Do you find that awards help in that?
Well, so I've only got the one, but that's all you need to put award-winning in your bio. It's really good, because when people ask for like a 50-word bio or something, and you're struggling to come up with things, it's really great. You've got those extra 2 words that you can that you can put in there. So the award was it was the Elsie Locke Award for Nonfiction at the New Zealand Children's Book Awards last year, which Alexandra and I got for this. So that was really cool, super cool. It's been one of those things where it's like been a bit of a life goal, but not like a I will have been a failure at my job if I don't win a book award. More just like I want to work towards the level at which this could be a thing.
Your work's recognised in that way.
Yeah. So that was super, super fun, and really just very exciting and cool. But I don't know if it really changed anything, sort of career-wise. I don't know, because it's one of those things where I don't know if it really mattered to anyone as much as it mattered to me. Like, I think more it's just being out there and people seeing you, like even in a thing like this, like if somebody watches this and kind of discovers my work this way, or like I've had jobs that have come from like if I've been on the radio doing something and then somebody's like, I'll look up her stuff, and then it's my work, and then that leads onto something. So I don't know if awards do much, but they're nice.
Do you think at the moment, like in New Zealand, your work is really well known? you're highly regarded, your stuff's really fabulous. But then there's that kind of international, and you want to be reaching to be a well-known graphic artist in the worldwide context.
Yeah, I mean, that would be really cool. Like, because I guess so many, and I think of this particularly with like the picture book work they do. I'm like, okay, how do I be Quentin Blake? Like, and this is another one of those things. It's like a or you know, how do I be John Claassen, or you know, people whose picture books are just internationally renowned and really cool. And it's not one of those things that I necessarily expect to like to achieve, but it's more like can I set myself on a path that aims for that, and whether or not I get there actually doesn't matter. It's just what direction do I want to work in. And so I suppose that is the thing. It's like, do you want to keep growing and pushing and be sort of like internationally up there? But the thing is, I don't think there's anything actually I don't know, like I think good in New Zealand is like,
I think good in New Zealand is fabulous.
Yeah, like I definitely don't feel like it's some sort of limitation where I'm like, I'm only known in New Zealand. It's more like, cool, I'm known.
The Egg and Spoon book, for example, does have global appeal.
Yeah, I guess it's just, you know, is it just going to get picked up? I mean, when you consider like the vast quantities of beautiful work that's out there. Like I was just looking recently at the like some of the lists of books at the book fair in Bologna, and I mean, and they're just from every country, and there is so much beautiful work out there, and we just don't get any of them here, or we get very few of them here if they're translated into English or whatever. And so I'm like, anything that I make is just like a drop in this sea of cool stuff. So I don't so like I think if it did break through, that would be extremely exciting. I haven't had, none of the books that I've worked on have been translated or anything, but that would be super cool.
Yeah. The crystal ball of salmon, Neil. Yeah.
But something that's cool about working with Gecko Press, for example, is that they because they're a very international publisher, they do have a lot of reach in other countries. And so like things like my last book with the Tiny Woman's Coat was like chosen as book of the week for the Times in the UK and stuff like that. So there is a level of there's some reach, but it's not quite like nobody over there knows who I am, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's been so lovely talking to you. I wondered if you could end on telling people where they can go to find your stuff.
I'm online at giselledraws.com, and you can follow me on Twitter. I'm at giselledraws, and you can say hi. And if I'm feeling brave, I'll say hi back. And you can find my work in bookshops in the children's section. And you can find my work in New Zealand Geographic and in schools and on walls somewhere, in people's kitchens, on tea towels. Yeah, but yeah, just you can go online, see what I've been up to, but it needs a bit of updating, sorry.
Wonderful, yay. And you can also find Giselle's stuff in libraries.
Yeah, I can't believe you can find my stuff in your favorite local awesome amazing library filled with amazing librarians.
Yeah.
Sorry, it's not even funny, it's just
We can just have an hour of you laughing if we want.
so we're 5 minutes in. This doesn't bode well.
That was the delightful Giselle Clarkson, which actually was quite representative of our interview. We just spent a lot of the time laughing.
Yes.
It was quite lovely. Before we start, I'd just like to thank our sponsors, Unity Books, Graphic, Gecko Press. Today is International Free Comic Book Day, so head down to... The technicians have found the soundboard. Head down to Graphic at Cuba Street and grab your free comic. I work for the National Library of New Zealand. Neil works for
Wellington City Libraries.
And this is ComicFest. If you want to ask Giselle a question, go to slido.com and enter the code ComicFestNZ. We've already got a lot of questions.
Yeah,
I'll hand it to Neil.
So this is it. I love this question. I wish I'd thought of this question myself. So this is from Vanita. She says, is there a band you'd like to design a poster for, Giselle?
I've never done a band poster before. I'd be open to it, potentially.
Hold on, Giselle. You've gone to the Daleks again with your exterminator voice. I'm just going to... Please say exterminate, exterminate, exterminate. Techies, what do we tell Giselle to do? Change the microphone settings, I think. Hold on. There's a lot of buzz happening at the end of the room.
Did that change anything?
Yes!
Yay! Woo!
Hooray!
Yay!
Wait, do I do it a second time? Because
No.
another thing's popped up.
Fine, just leave it as is. You're back to your beautiful voice.
So the question was, is there a band you particularly like to design a poster for?
Oh, like is there a particular band?
Yeah.
Or not just, or just in general? Ooh. No, I don't know. No, that's too hard. I can't think of one off the top of my head. The Beatles. Okay.
Got another great one. This is an anonymous one, and it says, with egg and spoon, did Alexandra cook for you and then you went and drew what you saw, or was it more a back and forth process between you and the design of the book? I love this idea of just getting lots of fabulous meals cooked for you and then go and draw on them.
Yeah, I wish. I actually, so like quite a while before starting the illustration on the book, I actually did go up to Havelock North where Alexandra's restaurant is, and I stayed there for a few days, and I did get a really cool sense of the place because I didn't know her restaurant. I'd never really spent any time in Hawke's Bay before even, so actually that informed a lot of the illustration. And then like the restaurant, Pippi Cafe, actually has such a distinct design of its own. Like it is pink magnificence inside and out. It's glorious. So that's where the color palette for the whole book came from, and lots of sort of lush plants and gold frames and stuff like that. But in terms of the actual food, nah, not really. Like, because I had eaten some of it when I was up visiting, a couple of the things, but actually it was just a matter of reading the recipes and deciding how they'd look. I didn't make much of it before illustrating it either. I just read the recipe and figured it out, I guess. And Alexandra could have totally said, no, that's not what that looks like, or whatever. But yeah, in most cases, like a pancake is a pancake. So, you know.
I've got another great question for you, and it's another anonymous one. And it's somebody that says, Giselle, would you ever consider presenting children's television? Your personality is delightful.
Yeah, give me a call.
We've got a question from Alana as well, who asks, what is your drawing process and how do you draw straight onto the computer or tablet?
Yeah, so I just I work in Photoshop, just out of habit, really. I got my first graphics tablet, my first Wacom tablet when I was 12. I was a really early adopter because I had a really great teacher in Form 2 who recognized that I loved art and I was also like a huge computer nerd. And he had a friend who worked at She Interactive that made, are they still around? Maybe they still exist, but they're making computer games and doing a lot of work for like the Lord of the Rings movies, which were coming up at the time. And he actually arranged for me to go and visit their studio to see this digital art that they were doing. And it was my first exposure to any of that stuff. And this guy was working on these incredible concept illustrations for a sort of fantasy video game. And he was working on a Wacom tablet. And I just, as soon as I saw it, I was like, I need that. And I had my life savings and my parents helped out. And that was sort of my one present that year. Was to get my first Wacom tablet and like a free version of Photoshop at the time. So that's how I've been working for the last 20 years.
And are you still using the Wacom or do you use...
No, I do still use a Wacom tablet, but I had to replace it a while ago. Yeah, my first one went. So yeah, I just open up a blank page in Photoshop and I have my favorite brushes that I've seen some of the other artists today have been talking about their brushes that they use. And like we all have our favorites that we go to, and I love the sort of scratchy crayon ones. They're also a bunch of Kyle Webster brushes that I bought ages ago, and they've just become a key part of my style. And I have this absolute morbid fear that something's going to go wrong and those brushes are going to get deleted and I won't know how to draw like myself anymore.
Yeah, it's been really interesting with the live streams today of watching everyone's different kind of setups in Clip Studio or Photoshop and their go-to brushes that, yeah, if you have to use someone else's setup, it's very
it's
daunting.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite parts of the day.
Yeah.
We've got another good anonymous question here, and the question is, we love Hazel and the Snails. There's a real subtlety, charm, but directness to Giselle's drawings. How did Giselle approach the brief for this book?
That was quite it's a beautiful story. When the publishers first sent it to me, I read it sort of a couple of times through and just sort of laughed and wept, and it's just a really gorgeous story. How I approached them, the brief was quite specific. Like I knew exactly what I had to draw. There was a list of things.
Oh, wow.
And the brief also specified that they had to be sort of sketchy, black and white, sort of pencil, charcoal type drawings. And I guess from there, the story set the tone. Like there was going to have to be like a certain poignancy to them. Maybe they represented some real quiet moments. Yeah, I think it was just a mix of what was in the brief and then my own response to the story. Was that it was going to be gentle, beautiful, a bit sad, but ultimately sort of heartwarming, bittersweet. So yeah, that's the kind of mood that I had to get into to do those illustrations.
How do you set yourself up into that mindset and get that mood when you've got a brief like that?
I often just sort of keep going back to the brief and I might pick some keywords out of the brief and actually write them on a piece of paper and put it next to my screen and keep on looking at that and kind of recite those words to myself. The thing is that it can be quite difficult when if I'm working on several different projects at once, which I usually am, if they're coming from very different places and very different vibes, that can be quite difficult to like switch between them. Like, you know, if I was going from like Hazel and the Snails, if I happened to be working on that at the same time as the ComicFest poster or whatever, there's like a bit of, it's kind of jarring, like shifting gear to do two different moods and two different styles. So yeah, it's all about those keywords for me to get myself in the zone.
Nice. And Neil, you had a question.
Yes, now I've got a question I really want to ask you. I know that you're the illustrator for the most successful tea towel ever produced in New Zealand.
Is that even true?
You heard it here first.
Yeah, you had it here first. I believe it's the one with the biscuits. I can understand why.
Yeah, it's in a lot of New Zealand kitchens, either on the wall or in their tea towel drawer.
Yeah, I have one.
How did you come up with that concept?
So I worked really closely with one of the editors of Annual 2, which is the book that it first appears in, Susan Paris, who I also worked with on Hazel and the Snails, and she's an editor at the school journal, so we've had quite a long working relationship now. And basically she commissioned me with the concept. She came and she was like, hey, so you know how you did this poster of fish of New Zealand, which was like one of the very first things I ever illustrated commercially. It was a print that I made for myself of like the fish and chip shop fish poster, but drawn, and the fish look alive, not dead. It always bothered me about those posters. They're just like, but yeah, she's like, so you know this poster, what if we did that, but biscuits? And I was immediately on board, and so I took it from there and did these sort of detailed scientific illustrations of biscuits and slices, and I made up the Latin names to go with them and stuff, and it was just supposed to be like the centerfold in the book, just like a fun thing for the kids reading it. But actually, just before the book was published, Susan posted a picture of it on the Facebook page of Annual, and it just went woo.
Yeah, it just is so funny and delightful and very kind of New Zealand specific, but also very relatable.
Yeah, and so funny.
Yeah.
I love the kind of scientifically drawn biscuits and then the funny names, jokiness of it. It's great.
I'm obsessed with scientific Latin. It's like a really nerdy hobby of mine.
We've got another question here. And another anonymous question. Do you dream in graphics, they ask?
Yeah, I think so, probably. I have a very visual brain. I think everything is in pictures, really, and like a super visual memory and stuff. So yeah, I think yeah, I probably do dream in quite sort of like full color pictures.
Can I ask another question as well? Without giving anything away, what projects can you tell us about that you're working on at the moment? Perhaps ones that you're really excited about?
For some reason, every time somebody asks this question, I'm like, nothing. Yes, I'm working on nothing. It just goes absolutely out of my brain. I'm not kidding. I can't think of a single.
Okay, all right. We've got another question. All right.
We can find.
So earlier you mentioned Quentin Blake as an influence, and someone says, is he an influence? Are there other influences on children's illustrations that you have?
Oh yes, so many. A lot of them are the ones I grew up with. A huge influence on me, and it's kind of all those like classic British illustrators, because that's what books were around a lot at the time, and especially because most of my books growing up were like leftover from my older siblings, so they're kind of like books that were published in the 70s, really. So like a lot of Quentin Blake and Judith Kerr, John Birmingham, those sort of people. A lot of Raymond Briggs. I just love Raymond Briggs's work, which I think is probably why I got into comics before I even sort of realized that I was into comics, because for some reason it didn't occur to me that Raymond Briggs's work, like Fungus the Bogeyman and Father Christmas and stuff, for some reason I didn't think they were comics. They totally are. And then I also, there was like a lot of Far Side books around the house as well growing up, and a lot of Tintin, and I was just really drawn to all of them. And I think the Far Side has actually been a bigger influence than I realize, especially in terms of the animal humor.
Yeah.
And I suppose just it's everything I see all the time now, and often it's just the people working around me in picture books, like people who are working in New Zealand now, and I look at their stuff and it's amazing, and it inspires me to be better. It's people like, it's terrible because I can't name everybody, but it's like Ruth Paul, Kimberly Andrews, Vasanti Anka, Gavin Bishop, David Elliott, everybody, just can everybody just assume they're on that list, please?
It's as soon as you start a list, it's worrying to leave people off. Hey, we've got a heap of other questions, but we're going to have to stop there because the tech team have said that I have to be back onto the time in the right time. So we're going to have to leave you there. But thank you so much for chiming in today, zooming in, popping in, live streaming in. I've lost my words. I've been here since 9 o'clock. I've had too many lollies. It's a lot.
And
That's
I would
been so good.
say
And
thank you for a
congratulations.
fabulous poster. We absolutely love it. It's wonderful.
Yeah, and it's been delightful to have the eyeballs popping through transitions during the scenes today.
like that.
We have
Yeah.
the lovely picture of Wellington on the bottom of the live stream. Your work is delightful, and we're so pleased that we asked you to do our poster. It's just wonderful.
Thank you so much, and congratulations on an amazing Comics Fest. It's so cool.
Yay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a lovely afternoon.
Bye.
Bye.